when I'm, looking at all these things that people are talking about with Caitlin Clark, it's like, guys, chill out. Like, she's going to be fine. Like, it's 2 games in. Are you kidding me? She's a student of the game. She got better every year. You're not going to just absorb all of the new information that's coming at you in 2 games, in 2 weeks. It takes time. And she will. I have no doubt about it. She's a student of the game. She continues to get better. And these are also points that coaches then address. Hey, let's continue to work on.
Just days before the 2026 WNBA season tipped off, Stephanie White said something about Caitlin Clark that instantly changed the mood around the Indiana Fever. And it was not the kind of comment coaches make unless they know something the rest of the league does not. After months of injury doubts, silent rehab, and rising pressure, White's message felt less like praise and more like a warning. So, what exactly did she see in Clark that has everyone suddenly on edge?
We don't have time for these random side quests that you are now doing right before the season is about to start. It's already a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of catch up to be done to build this team up around Caitlin Clark, to make the right decisions in this offseason, one starting with the critical Kelsey Mitchell decision, draft decisions, and you are running around doing side quests.
There is a particular kind of warning shot in sports that does not come wrapped in trash talk, dramatic headlines, or locker room theatrics. Sometimes it arrives dressed as praise, spoken calmly by a coach who has seen enough behind closed doors to know exactly what is coming next.
Indiana Fever 2026 season is already starting off bad. Look like Stephanie White has made headlines for all of the wrong reasons. We're less than 7 days away from the CBA deal being officially signed, sealed, and delivered. The big return of Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever girls for the WNBA 2026 calendar year should be the #1 priority, you will think, for the head coach. Well, I'm here to tell you, don't look like she give a damn about Caitlin Clark comeback, and it damn sure don't look like she care about the Indiana Fever.
That is what made Stephanie White's message to Caitlin Clark before the 2026 WNBA season feel less like encouragement and more like a thunderclap aimed at the rest of the league. Because when the head coach of the Indiana Fever finally spoke publicly about what she had witnessed from Clark, she was not simply complimenting her superstar guard.
Is on the hot seat. Kelly Krauskopf sending new eyes and new ears to the coach's room saying, hey, keep an eye on that Stephanie White, will ya? Make sure she doesn't do anything that we wouldn't approve. Lynn Dunn, please, has been reintroduced by the Indiana Fever as a coaching consultant. If you guys remember last year, Lynn Dunn moved from the general manager to the Fever advisor.
She was telling everyone in the clearest possible terms that the version of Caitlin Clark returning in 2026, it is not the same player the league limped past in 2025. And that should make every defensive coordinator in the WNBA deeply uncomfortable. Because what looked from the outside like a frustrating sophomore setback for Clark was inside Indiana's walls, something very different.
I am not knocking anyone for pursuing their other passions and collecting paychecks, getting your money. I've been a proponent of the I'm not going to run around and tell people to take pay cuts thing. I'm not going to tell people you shouldn't get your money. But Stephanie White, right now, you need to be focused on things that need to be done in this off season, as you absolutely screwed the pooch and blew it last off season when you wanted to do Stephanie White and friends. You went and messed up last off season, bringing in all your old pals, Natasha Howard.
It was a year of reconstruction, recalibration, and quiet obsession. While much of the basketball world spent 2025 debating whether injuries had interrupted Clark's rise, Stephanie White was standing in practice gyms, watching a player who treated rehabilitation with the same intensity most athletes reserve for Game 5 playoff elimination nights. That is where this story really begins. Not with a flashy press conference or viral social media post, but in the wreckage of a season that was supposed to become Clark's grand takeover. The 2025 season was meant to be Caitlin Clark's coronation after a rookie year that turned fans' heads already, treating ordinary Fever regular season games like national holidays. Then reality stepped in wearing a medical brace. Injuries hit early, and they hit hard. What began as preseason physical strain spiraled into a lingering groin issue that never fully released its grip. Instead of spending the year torching defenses coast to coast, Clark spent much of it fighting her own body. By season's end, she had appeared in only 13 games, a number so absurdly low it felt like a clerical error.
Stated Stephanie White puts Indiana Fever aside and step away from the WNBA for a smidget. Guys, why would she know you got to focus on free agent? You know you got to focus on Kelsey Mitchell. You know you got to focus on what offense you got to run. But instead, look like Fever coach balanced Team USA duties and ESPN experience at the breakthrough 2025 season. Look like she's trying to capitalize on the momentum that this team generated for the calendar year last year. Instead, the gym lights never really turned off. They just shined somewhere else for a while.
And yet somehow, Indiana still refused to collapse. The Fever finished 24-20 and reached the playoffs, eliminated the Atlanta Dream, and pushed the mighty Las Vegas Aces into a semifinal battle that stretched all the way into overtime in Game 5. For a team missing its biggest star for most of the campaign, that was not survival. That was proof of structure. And that structure had Stephanie White's fingerprints all over it. White had returned to Indiana with a mission that extended far beyond simply coaching a talented roster. She had been hired to unlock Clark, completely to turn a generational attraction into a generational winner. This was not a random coaching hire. This was a former WNBA Coach of the Year, stepping into a franchise that believed it had finally found its once-in-a-generation centerpiece. White delivered the message that changed the tone of the entire off-season. She described watching Clark work up close and said something that instantly carried more weight than any stat line ever could. What struck White most was not Clark's talent, not her range, not her passing vision, not even the jaw-dropping shot-making that has already become basketball folklore. It was efficiency. White explained that Clark wastes nothing. No wasted movement, no wasted repetition, and no wasted energy. Every action has purpose.
The Iowa game at Maryland, her junior year, and I was staying at the same hotel as they were, and it was like a pro event, because at the hotel, like, fans were lined up out the door. They had to line to wall it off and fence it off, rope it off, the area. And at the time, I think I said it's like Taylor Swift 2.0, and it literally is like Taylor Swift 2.0. And because of that, her name gets thrown into a lot of conversations that have absolutely nothing to do with her or her interests.
That is not normal praise. That is the kind of thing coaches say about players who are building something dangerous. Then, White made the comparison nobody expected. She called Caitlin Clark-Taylor Swift 2.0, and suddenly, the sports world had a new metaphor to chew on. At first glance, it sounded like one of those modern viral comparisons designato hijack headlines for clicks. But White's reasoning was deeper than internet gimmicks. She was talking about the burden of cultural scale. Like Taylor Swift, Clark is no longer merely performing in her profession. She is carrying an industry's attention economy on her shoulders. When Clark works, she works. That distinction mattered. Because by the time White made after those remarks, doubts had already begun floating through basketball circles. Could Clark still be Clark after the injuries? Would the explosiveness return? Would the rhythm still be there after months away from real competition? Then, Puerto Rico happened. In March 2026, Clark joined Team USA for the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifiers tournament in San Juan, and Stephanie White had the perfect seat to evaluate her comeback because she was there too, serving as assistant coach under Carl Lawson. That meant White was not guessing about Clark's recovery. She was watching it in live action.
What does this mean for the Indiana Fever? Is Stephanie White on the hot seat? Is Kelly Krauskopf buckling down, getting eyes and ears on the promised child, Stephanie White? Or is this a whole bunch of nothing? There are two ways to look at this, folks. Glass half empty, glass half full. This can mean something. Hopefully it means something.
And what she saw erased every lingering question mark. Clark played in all 5 games. She averaged nearly 12 points per contest, led the tournament in assists, and did it against elite international competition while sharing the court with veteran stars like Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, and Kelsey Plum. This was not a ceremonial return. Tour, this was a pressure-tested proving ground. And Clark looked completely unbothered. That may have been the most terrifying part for the rest of the league. After months away from competitive basketball, players usually show rust. Timing slips, confidence hesitates, and shot rhythm arrives late like a delayed flight connection in Chicago. Clark showed none of it. Then came the final punctuation mark. Team USA finished a perfect 5-0. And Caitlin Clark was named tournament MVP. That was when the Indiana Fever social media team posted the image that quietly sent shivers through the league. Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark side by side in San Juan, captioned simply, "Signing off from San Juan." Meanwhile, Indiana itself has quietly transformed into something much more dangerous than last year's resilient overachiever. The Fever core remains intact, anchored by Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and rising young talent around them. The franchise has made retaining Kelsey Mitchell a top priority, understanding that a healthy Clark-Mitchell backcourt could become the most explosive offensive pairing in the league.
There's only one concession stand open at our arena during the game, so it's certainly changed a lot. And now every time we play at home, it's sold out. When we go on the road, it's sold out. The fans are super passionate; they love it, and that's what I always tell people. Like, I think that's what kind of changed about women's sports and certainly women's basketball about the Fever is like people aren't just buying the tickets to like fill the seat and kind of check the box.
Clark herself has not exactly been shy about expectations either. During an NBC basketball appearance, she openly declared that Indiana should be the championship favorite in 2026. That is not arrogance. That is a player who has been sitting on unused competitive fuel for months. And here is where Stephanie White's the message becomes truly fascinating. Her words were never just for Clark. They were for the league. She replaced the storyline with something much more intimidating: certainty. White was telling opponents that the player they are preparing for is healthier, sharper, and mentally tougher than before. She was also telling Clark something equally powerful: I see every unseen hour. That matters more than outsiders realize. Superstars carry unique psychological pressure, especially ones who become symbols larger than their sport. Clark is no longer judged like ordinary athletes. Every off night becomes debate television material. Every missed shot becomes social media content. Every injury becomes a national conversation. White understands that burden. That is why her message before the 2026 season felt so different. It was not motivational fluff. It was deeply specific, rooted in observation, backed by months of first-hand evidence.
Yes. Stephanie White makes a career move before Indiana Fever season. Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White is taking her talents to the NCAA tournament. Now, when I hear you taking your talents to the NCAA tournament, I'm hoping you're doing some damn scouting. It better be revolved around scouting and seeing who we're going to get with the number 10 pick, or I don't know if it's 10 or 11 pick, in the WNBA draft. I hope that is what you are focused on. Let's take a look.
And now the season opener looms. The return of Caitlin Clark to full regular season action is already shaping up like a playoff atmosphere disguised as an opening night game. Tickets are vanishing fast. Anticipation in Indianapolis is boiling. Opposing teams are pretending this is just another season launch, which is about as believable as pretending sharks are indifferent to blood and water. Because if Stephanie White is right, and all signs suggest she is, the rest of the WNBA is about to meet a version of Caitlin Clark forged in frustration, rebuilt through injury, and sharpened by absence. And that is often when great athletes become most dangerous. Not when everything goes right, but when they have spent months forced to sit still, watch others play, and memorize exactly what they plan to take back. Stephanie White's shocking message before 2026 was ultimately very simple. She has seen the storm forming, and she believes the league is not ready for it. Because once a coach like Stephanie F. White says something like that publicly, the countdown begins, and in Indiana, that countdown is no longer measured in months or weeks. It is measured in possessions, in practices, in every closed-door scrimmage where Clark is now reportedly moving with the kind of rhythm that makes assistant coaches stop mid-note and just watch. Inside Fever Camp, there is a growing sense that 2026 is not merely a comeback season for Caitlin Clark. It is the season where the entire experiment around her finally becomes complete.
What people need to understand, we need great leadership in this time across all levels. This is straight up the most important moment in this league's history. This league's been around for 25 plus years, and this is a moment we have to capitalize on. So that's honestly what I would say. I think there's, Fee said it all with what she said, and I think the points she made were very valid.
Had you heard that story from her before
No.
she said it publicly? And then have you spoken with Kathy Engelbert or her at all?
No.
That is what makes this moment so fascinating. For all the noise surrounding Clark since she entered the league, the truth is that the basketball version of Caitlin Clark has still not had a full professional season in the ideal environment. Her rookie year was historic but chaotic, packed with media pressure, relentless defensive targeting, and the burden of instantly transforming an entire franchise. Her second season was interrupted by injury before it could properly begin. In a strange way, the WNBA has spent 2 years reacting to fragments of her full potential. Stephanie White believes 2026 is when the full picture arrives, and if White's track record means anything, that belief should not be dismissed as lewd. The sponsors, the broadcasters, and half the basketball planet would happily have fast-forwarded the process months ago. That patience may now become Indiana's biggest advantage. Because while rivals spent the off-season building scouting reports based on old footage, Clark spent hers rebuilding every layer of her game. White hinted as much when discussing Clark's off-season progression, noting that the emphasis was not just on recovery but on refinement. Endurance came first, then movement efficiency, then mechanics, then game speed reintroduction. That sequence matters.
Oh, Mama Bluter. Lisa Bluter had some explosive words in an interview in regards to Caitlin Clark. This is major. This just proves exactly why Stephanie White is not the coach for Caitlin Clark. We have all voiced our concerns in a major way. We watched a lot of the nonsense that Stephanie White pulled with Caitlin Clark last season. Okay, she came in here and completely messed up the offense, brought in a bunch of vets that Natasha Howard's talking about winning MVP. DeWanna Bonner showed up and scammed the team.
And there are already hints that Clark's game may look different in 2026, not in identity but in precision. Expect smarter pacing. Expect better shot selection in transition. Expect a version of Clark that understands even more clearly when to attack and when to dissect. Injuries, unpleasant as they are, often force elite athletes into deeper basketball intelligence. When the body is unavailable, the mind studies everything. And then comes Kelsey Mitchell. Some even labeled it pressure manufacturing bravado. But those inside the Fever organization likely heard something else entirely. Confirmation that Clark sees the same blueprint White sees. That blueprint is no longer theoretical, it is operational. The rest of the WNBA, meanwhile, has reasons to be uneasy beyond Indiana's roster itself. The league is expanding. New franchises in Portland and Toronto have altered roster depth. Across the board, redistributing role players and disrupting established chemistry on multiple contenders. Expansion seasons create instability, and instability often favors teams with strong internal continuity. Indiana suddenly has that continuity. White has the system, Clark has her health. The core is largely intact. The identity is clearer than ever.
General consensus is to let Caitlin Clark run. All right, when the Fever run, the Fever looked like the Fever that we all fell in love with the second half of 2024. Okay, Stephanie White likes to slow the game down. She's an old OW NBA player. She's not an old person. She's not old. She's probably my age. I'm 51, 52. Sometimes I forget. And yeah, she's not old by any measure, but her old way of thinking, her playing the sport, game planning for the sport is old guard W.
And perhaps most dangerous of all, they now have emotional momentum. That is the hidden force in championships. Runs that statistics rarely capture. Teams that believe they are correcting unfinished business often become terrifyingly resilient. Indiana's 2025 playoff run, achieved largely without Clark, gave this roster proof it can survive adversity. Now imagine that same group adding back a fully restored superstar who has spent months hearing whispers about fragility, decline, and uncertainty. That is not fuel, that is rocket propellant. Stephanie White surely understands this better than anyone. Her message before the season was never meant to create headlines alone. It was meant to establish emotional architecture around Clark's return. By speaking with such specificity about Clark's work ethic, By emphasizing discipline instead of hype, White shifted the conversation away from celebrity and back toward craft. That reframing is critical, and now that Machine is healthy again, when opening night arrives and Clark steps onto that floor against Dallas, the biggest question may no longer be whether she can return to form. The bigger question, and the one Stephanie White has effectively dared the league to confront, this is what happens if Caitlin Clark returns better than before. Because if that answer turns out to be what Indiana believes it is, then the warning White delivered before the 2026 season will soon look less like a message and more like prophecy.